In Nia Liachain Niemba, Tugu Rifley FN Sulanacha donna trúpaí. Bhí tréimhse síochána sa Congo, rud a hála gohanamh, agus níor chur mór an choiríola as don chatlána deitile machán in mí anar ní deag seas go héin. Ach, bhí triblóid a tacht. Cuig bhí dar gion, I mehebh, tháinig catlán eile go dtí an Congo. Bhí na céta saidúr túrastal eile airce ag uachtarán Tchombe I gceantar Katanga, chun an gendarmerie a stiúra agus iad a chur gcuine aontú Katanga leis an chuid eile gon tír.
You knew it wasn't an amateur outfit that was going against, it was very professional. They were being paid for by the Katangese army, or the government basically there.
Cheol na náisiún aontaithe oibriocht Rumpunch. Bhí sé mar aimach go gach saidúr túrastal bán a gháil agus a dhíbert ón gceantar.
There was a likelihood of 31% casualties in the operation Rumpunch. We're told to be ready for Reveille at 4 o'clock in the morning, that the company had been tasked with taking over the gendarmerie headquarters.
Deire leis an oibriocht. Tháinig sé níor dua winter Katanga, agus grú gríoch bhealach chomh-héifeacht tú é, nar scuilú fiú orchar amháin, ach níor mhair an rá sin a bhád.
Mercenaries, what were shipped out, a lot of them were back in within a couple of weeks again. Operation Mortar kicked off early in the morning of the 13th of September.
Mar chuid den oibriocht, eisiíodh barántas de gháil uachtarán Moise Tchombe, chomá le saidúirí túrastal agus cóirleoirí eachtaranacha, ón meilg den chuid is mó. Idir an dá lín, crú saidúirí ó chompántas A an tríocha cuaigú Catlán, faoi stiúr Ceanfort Pat Quinlan, go baile beag mínadóireachta dar a bannam Jadotville. Bhí siad an chun éon siaránnig Belgacha a bhí fós an a chosint.
We saw the last of C Company coming out of Jadotville as we went in. So they were after cutting the numbers from 300 to 150 odd. So we didn't stand much of a chance at all. We were sent in to protect the Belgians, who didn't want protection. Because the reason that the Swedes and C Company left it was because of the hostility towards them.
Ach dúirt an Nordathe ón gceann chathrú in Elizabethville, gur chóirt an chompántas fanacht san áit na rá siad. Thug Quinlan ordú don na fear a good cosintí a dheangniú.
They were preventing us from any movement at all, and this type of standoff went on for maybe 2 or 3 days, not allowing us freedom.
In Elizabethville, níor of adagur umpig oibriocht Mortar, isteach in a coga. Maríoch 3 haidúr éarnach sa trid. I Jadotville, bhí drochscéalach fannacht ar Ceanfort Pat Quinlan, agus fear chompántais A.
We were saying mass, and 3 trucks drove in full of troops. They thought they had nothing to do, only to take over our camp. But one of our sergeants, Sergeant John Monaghan, maybe he wasn't a good Catholic, but he wasn't at mass. And he saw what was happening. He jumped into the machine gun trench and he fired a few bursts over their heads.
That more or less saved us. We gave the fellas at mass time to regroup more or less, to get into their trenches and get defending the place. You know, the whole lot of them above, no weapons, most of them, you know.
A couple of hours after then, all hell broke loose.
They started to put fire in our direction and we returned it.
Lean an tunsaí a rai ar fan lé. Bhí na fear ina drinchí Brite faoighrian na Africa.
Then our water and electricity supplies were cut off after the evening of the first day. And whatever water was stored, it was stored in any kind of a container, including the baths in some of the villas that we had allocated to us by the people from civilian procurement. And in one particular case, somebody decided to have a bath in the water, and that finished that as drinking water.
An sin, baggart eile. Tháinig scart etalán Katanga ag scradíal in a dro, ag scuile gá bhuam a gard de lár fuinte chosantaí an chompántais.
there was a soldier, he said, "Tell me, will we ever get out of here alive?" he said. I reassured the poor devil. He was afraid. Basically, he was afraid, and he was worrying about his future.
An carú lá de bhean fór, tháinig scéal gur an saidúirí túrastal agus muintir Katanga ag iarra sus córacha idirbheartú le Ceannfort Quinlan, agus gomach fórsa fórinta ar a bhealach, teimhiste go chúpla uairich laig.
They looked for a ceasefire to pick up their dead, which Pat Quinlan agreed to. And when they had their dead all picked up, they broke the ceasefire.
Bhí beagnach seachtain caite faoi léigear ag Jadotville, agus bhí an scar detlán Katangach fós a gúnsaí, ach anois, bhí na héirnig dá raigart den an náirm héin.
When things were getting tough, they weren't getting the better of us. They looked for another ceasefire. So immediately then, our company commander, Pat Quinlan, got on to headquarters in Elizabethville. He was told that there was ceasefire talks going on and everything was going very well. I suppose he thought then, well, if I don't agree to this, well then it's going to affect him back in Elizabethville. So he did agree to it.
Dumping gá íireach tarthála arás, mar gheall fíochmhar na Katangig, a bhí cuineál grím deangan ar ruthid lufíre, an taon bhealach isteach sa bhaile.
Then I remember seeing this black minister or whatever he was. Next thing, Pat Quinlan was sent for. And he was told that we were being taken prisoners. Now, to be taken a prisoner during a ceasefire is against everything the Geneva Convention ever stood for. A ceasefire is a ceasefire. But then again, they broke it again.
When eventually they took us, they wouldn't believe that none of us were killed. They actually went around poking and holes and loose air to see what was the bodies there. No, it's hard to believe after 5 days nobody was killed.
That's the way it was. We were prisoners then for about 6 weeks.
We were brought down from Jadotville to Camp Massart for a negotiation about our release and trading over Katangese prisoners held elsewhere by the UN. There was no negotiation worthwhile. We were loaded on the buses again and took us out to a place called Nzilo 1 camp. The most of the people that came out were women and children roaring for blood and Irish flesh. And the guards weren't worried too much at first. But then machetes or panga knives started to appear. So we were moved into Colwezi to a compound, which later became a UN compound in itself. Then on the 25th of October, we were told to go on a sightseeing tour again on the buses. But it was kind of prearranged that we weren't coming back.
The Katangese soldier that was driving the bus, I would sit to the driver's left. And the orders were that if there was any sign of them bringing us back, a good hefty fella beside me, he would lift your man out of the driver's seat and I would move in. I would just reach in and grab the steering wheel, sit in and go through the roadblocks. But we were exchanged and we didn't have to.
We headed in to where there was an old airport, and that was the first we saw of UN vehicles. There was Katangese on one side and UN at the other. We were debussed and fell in. The Katangese were debussed and fell in. We marched up one side and they marched down the other side. And we were loaded onto trucks and taken back to Leopold Farm and allocated very good accommodation inside the cows full of mosquitoes. But at least we could say we were free, you know.
Agus deire bhí sé hart, agus still etlán leis an chéad chuid gon 35 cathláin ar bhaile clia. Ach tar éis na fáilte críúla ó chomráidí cóird agus clán, tháinig ciúnas, agus an sin thosa an chaint.
We actually got a cool reception back home because we surrendered. They didn't know the situation. They didn't know how it happened. They didn't know there was a ceasefire in place. They just thought we came out and surrendered. The A Company were looked down upon for many, many years, 46 years.
Agus muintir na hÉireann ag trid ag Jadotville, fuair Dag Hammarskjöld, rúnaí na Náisiún Aontaithe, bás I dimpiste Eteláin, agus é ar a bhealach chuig an ródéis le idir bhartú I dhéanamh le Uachtarán Chambé. Deathraigh seasamh na Náisiún Aontaithe tháríthe. Gheall an rúnaí gníomhach ú tant, go núsáideach siad neart chun deire a chur le scara Katanga ón Congo. Fada sa bhí fear an tríocha séú cathláin san éar a mealach ag an Congo, bhí orchar á scuile in Elizabethville.
We went on to Leopoldville, the capital. It was then we were told that there was a lot of trouble in Elizabethville. And we got absolution on the tarmac from our chaplain before we got on the plane. And when we were on the plane, we had to change from our khaki uniform into our bush greens. And we had to break open boxes of ammunition and load up and everything like that. Because we didn't know what we were going to do when we got there, whether we'd even be able to land or not.
At Elizabethville, preparing to land, one of the engines on the plane was knocked out from ground fire by the gendarmerie. They counted 40 puncture holes in the fuselage.
There was chaos on the plane because people were jumping left, right and centre and didn't know where to go. Some people were even lying on the floor of the plane. But of course, I thought in my wisdom was I'd get my helmet, scrunch myself up as small as possible and sit on it. So I made myself as small a target as possible, which turned out to be a good idea because consequently, later on in years, I got married and had 5 children. So I kind of protected my assets, as the fella says.
We eventually landed and there was fuel flying all over the place. But that plane had to be unloaded at the double. The biggest fear the Yanks had was us wearing hobnail boots, which would cause sparks on the tarmac. And we could have been involved in an inferno. But luckily it didn't happen.